Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Hello and welcome to Why the Long Face?
Yes, hello. I'm Paul and this is Ollie.
Yeah, we don't introduce ourselves enough.
No, we don't.
Good to meet you, fella.
Good to meet you too.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this coffee.
How y'all doing? We're drinking today coffee.
Coffee.
Uncle Paul, Dr. Keedwell, had a bit of a rough night last night. I went to bed early, a very good boy, to be fresh for today's recording, but Uncle didn't. So I'm not having a drink today. We're having lovely coffee brewed by me.
That's very nice. Yeah, we're doing a daytime recording session.
Yeah, I'm quite
We're
like
often a bit more fresh, aren't we?
Yeah, you can't tell. At our age, it goes up and down. There's a big cycle of way, and then oh god, everything's so annoying.
God.
Yeah,
I think I've still got loads of energy. I mean, in some ways we've got more stamina than when we were younger.
I don't know, not when it comes to going out late at night.
Oh, well, that's true. It just piled upon you a bit more.
So
maybe.
listen, have you ever heard of weed?
Weed,
Pot,
pot,
grass, dope,
marijuana,
doobie,
marijuana.
reefer, ganja, hash, herb, devil's lettuce,
We're talking about the
doobie,
intoxicating
chronic,
plant
blunt,
known as cannabis.
draw. I've got hundreds
Enough?
of these. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, I have. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about a constituent of it. Correct?
That's right. I didn't realise it until we did the research for this, but we are talking today about CBD,
Which is short for...
cannabidiol. I can't do it. Cannabidiol.
You always think of David Baddiel.
Oh yeah, cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol is how I'd pronounce it, but we don't need to worry about that because most people just call it CBD anyway.
But cannabidiol would be like David Baddiel in a can.
But we need to talk about CBD, don't we?
I think so. Yeah, it's on point and it's on message. So yes.
Yeah, because 1.2 million people are using CBD in the UK.
Say what?
And that's doubled since last year.
In 1 year.
So it's a fad,
man.
man.
Let's get this straight. In 1 year, the use of this stuff has doubled.
It's doubled in the UK, yeah.
In the UK.
And not only can you get it as an oil, you can get it as a juice, you can get it as CBD infused spring water, available from Ocado.
Nice.
Um,
Buzz marketing.
CBD turmeric oil, CBD juices, CBD cosmetics,
Wow.
CBD sexual lubricant.
What? Really?
Chews for anxious dogs. I'm not kidding.
Chews for anxious dogs.
It's out of control. But most people use CBD, just get CBD oil from Holland and Barrett, or from a Whole Foods store, or online, I guess.
Wind back, Professor. Wind back. You were saying before.
Thank you for the promotion.
Yeah, it's very good. We'll get.
I should be a
free stuff.
professor, of course.
You should. Well, if your career had gone the way you deserved,
if I'd had the application.
If you had, you would be a professor by now.
Well, anyway, let's continue. Let's not linger there.
Well, no, let's linger a bit and say, what else should you be by now, Uncle?
Probably Nobel Prize winner.
I think so. Oscar winner.
Yes.
And what do you get for being a really good architect? That as well.
That won the Sterling Prize.
I think you should be the first person in history to have won an Oscar.
But I
Nobel
haven't
Prize and a
because I've just
Pissed
been
it away.
flitting from all four pursuits.
Yeah, I pissed it away and loose women.
Oh, the other thing I should have had is the Booker Prize, of course, as well.
Of course, for your books.
Yeah. But I've been a master of none, unfortunately.
You've been a jack of none, actually.
But I've been a. That's very. Listen, I'm supposed to have credibility in this podcast, otherwise the whole thing falls apart, and you're just left with a business consultant with a few opinions.
That is the last thing you want. Absolutely. No, good point. No, you are one of the UK's
quite highly qualified.
Oh yeah, loads of letters, isn't it?
Although I'm not qualified to talk about my experience of CBD because I've not tried it.
No, me neither.
However, loads of people have, and it's 14% of people in the US.
Yeah.
So that's why we're talking about it, because it's just happening like a mad thing at the moment.
Let's be clear. A lot of people don't realise what it is, right? So there's this thing called cannabis, which we've all heard of.
Right, which contains more than 80 different chemicals when you start melting it down and playing around with it.
And one of them is?
And they're all known collectively as cannabinoids, right?
Yep.
The most abundant cannabinoid is THC, which most people have heard of, I think, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, right? And that is the psychoactive the most psychoactive part of the cannabis plant.
So that's what turns you into a bit of a boring,
into a dribbling,
pain in the ass.
into a dribbling, giggling fool.
Yeah.
And later someone who's completely asleep. Particularly if you take the skunk weed, which is known for its smell, and it's the THC that is particularly potent, right?
Great.
So that's why skunk weed is known as skunk.
But we ain't talking about no THC.
Smelly THC.
We ain't talking about no THC. Right?
We ain't talking about no THC because CBD is thought to be, well, it's the second most abundant cannabinoid, and it is thought to be non-psychoactive. In other words, it does not make you high.
Okay. So it's not mind-altering in layman's terms?
Not in that way. Not in a let's trigger a high kind of way.
Got it.
But it may have a calming effect, which is why it's really taking off.
So tell me, is there a history of the medical use of doobie?
The doobster. It's been used really since medieval times for medicinal purposes, and in the West, and before that in ancient China, was used actually to target malaria, menstrual symptoms, gout, and constipation.
Huh? I'm listening.
In the West, it's been used for pain, epilepsy, nausea, and vomiting for quite some time, and it was really thought to be of particular value in the US until the 1930s, when it was not outlawed, but it was no longer prescribed. And I think it was proscribed or forbidden in 1970 when it was listed as a Schedule 1 substance.
By the way, a couple of
things. It
things.
was claimed as illegal with no medical value. Just like that.
So proscribed is the opposite of prescribed then?
Yeah,
I never
proscribed, yeah.
And what I didn't realise until doing a little bit of sniffing around is that it was legal in the UK until, 1970 did you say?
This is the date from the US, but it tended to be similar in the UK, didn't it?
Yeah. So when that lady who had her oil taken off her, Charlotte Caldwell, and her little boy Billy was severely epileptic.
Yeah.
What was taken off her? Was that CBD or was that cannabis oil?
I thought that was cannabis oil, but actually it doesn't matter because neither are licensed for the prescribing of treatment of epilepsy yet in the UK.
But she could have CBD oil on her perfectly legally, though.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the beef.
It just couldn't be prescribed.
Yeah. It's not surprising she was upset. Poor Billy Caldwell.
I think that it can be understood perfectly well, yes, given that the FDA in the US have given CBD a license for the treatment of those two particularly cruel conditions that can affect children and lead to very poorly controlled seizures. And they are Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome.
Right.
So CBD has been licensed for that indication.
Lenny Kravitz syndrome.
It can reduce... What's that?
Lenny Kravitz syndrome.
Lennox-Gastaut.
Oh, sorry.
Able to reduce the number of seizures and in some cases stop them altogether, right? And I think licensing is awaited in the UK because it's not just a rubber stamp exercise. We have different sort of criteria, different hoops to jump through. But essentially, it's gone through the randomised placebo-controlled trials that are required to get licensing in most countries.
And as I understand it, you get a license for a particular drug to treat a particular condition.
Right.
Okay. So, and it's been licensed in the UK for nothing.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you now wanted to take CBD and use it as a way of reducing your anxiety, you'd need a whole new set of trials to show that it's effective for that indication.
So theoretically...
And you could patent it for that use then.
Right. So if a pharmaceutical company wanted to stump up the cash to do enough research to satisfy... Who does it have to satisfy in the UK?
Oh, the Medicines Control Agency.
So if they stumped up enough cash to do that, then they could license
CBD
CBD for a particular condition and therefore be the only person to supply that as a medicine.
And it would be added to the British National Formulary.
Formulary being an excellent word. It's just a list of medicines that can be prescribed, right?
Yeah.
Fab.
But until that happens, you will be getting your CBD and using it unlicensed and at your own risk, I guess, because it's unregulated. We don't know really what doses are required, and we don't know the potency of the stuff that we're buying necessarily, even if it says so on the label that it's a certain strength. What does that actually mean? How much of it should I take? Where's the evidence that I should be taking 3 drops under my tongue or 6?
Yeah, because it says, I'm here on the Holland & Barrett website,
Yeah.
you can choose your potency. There's 2, 2.75 or 5. And like you say, what does that mean? And obviously the size of bottle. And then it says, and I quote, put a few drops under the tongue. Few drops, don't know what that means. 2 or 3 times a day, maximum 15 drops. That's helpful, I suppose. Leave the oil in the mouth for 1 minute before swallowing. Gradually build up the dose. I mean, that sounds really official, but actually it's just kind of made up by somebody in Holland & Barrett marketing. I don't know.
Probably not made up. They've probably gone with their best guess based on whatever evidence is out there at the moment.
And it also says gradually build up the dose, which is really interesting, but doesn't give any idea of how far. I guess it probably means to a maximum of 15 drops, but it just sounds a bit random.
And also,
to me.
it won't say on the bottle what it's for either, because they're not allowed to say, a CBD for anxiety or something on the label, unless you've got that high-level evidence from a randomised controlled trial, right? But we do have other forms of evidence. So I think you were going to ask me, weren't you? Why the buzz about CBD, which, by the way, has been available legally in this country for years. You've always been able to buy CBD, actually.
So why the buzz about it? I don't know why I feature on this podcast at all. You might as well just sit there and do a verbal essay.
Because
or hire some sort of automatic voice. Why don't you just do it with Alexa? Why don't you just say, hey Alexa, have you got any questions on CBD? She'd be better and nicer voiced.
Yeah, it's true, actually. You're fired.
Actually, I wish I hadn't said that. You can't fire me.
No,
I own 50% of the franchise.
No, absolutely need you, man. You are the best facilitator in the biz.
Oh.
And you're summarising at the end. It's just a joy. Such a joy.
Right,
it's a beauty to behold.
So why the buzz about CBD?
Unlike your face. The buzz. It's great. I tell you, it's mainly because of the increasing number of scientific studies showing its potential. I think since 2012, mostly. It's intriguing. Well, we make our own endocannabinoids. We make our own kind of cannabinoid type chemicals in our brains.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
And what CBD does is increase the friendly chemical anandamide in the brain.
That sounds friendly. Like Amanda Holden.
By basically binding to these receptors and increasing the anandamide. And yeah, it's basically a big hug for the brain. It's supposed to increase a brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which actually helps protect cells from death, but also can encourage those cells to branch out a bit and make friendly connections with other cells that might be helpful.
Sorry, what's doing this? The thing that we produce or the...
yes, the thing we naturally produce, but taking CBD has been shown in rat studies anyway, in animal studies, to increase the amounts of this substance.
Bloody hell, how do they test that?
Normal production.
Oh, yeah. How do they test it?
Well, they might just kill the rat and take brain slices and look at them under the microscope, or they might put a micro pipette into their brains.
That's not so bad. But how do they get them stressed in the first place?
Oh, no. I'm just talking about studies on rats where they just give them CBD and look at the neurochemical changes.
Got it.
So they're also, it looks like it binds to serotonin receptors. And as we know, serotonin in particular, 5-HT1A receptors thought theoretically could lead to a reduction in anxiety and even depression, right?
Isn't that how SSRIs work?
Yeah, kind of. Not exactly, but the effect is to increase action on these receptors effectively.
Is it selective serotonin reuptake
inhibitors?
I got it. I remembered that as well. I'm not even reading notes. I rule. Oh, well, that's interesting.
And that combined with the thought that with the observation that CBD seems to have very few harmful effects, but we can come back to that. But then there was a review of this rat brain evidence in 2014. I was looking at these prey and predator experiments.
Oh dear, what happens there?
So animals are treated with CBD froze fewer times when exposed to predators, the dangerous situations, than if they hadn't been given CBD. And because they didn't freeze as much, which is an index of just how terrified or petrified they are.
Ah, that's where petrified comes from.
Tone to stone.
As ELO would say.
Oh God.
Turned to stone when you were gone. I can't go on. So he was exhibiting stress, and as a result, he turned to stone, metaphorically.
He turned to stone. Yeah, that's true.
And he also turned to stone when you're coming home. He
Such
can't
a-
go on.
Such a boomer.
Me or Jeff Lynne.
Well, I guess Jeff Lynne.
I did a Christmas
He's
quiz.
probably voted for Brexit, didn't he?
No, he lives in France, mate.
Yeah, it doesn't stop him though.
Well, he's Birmingham, isn't he?
He's Birmingham,
Okay.
a hotbed of Brexiteers.
Yeah, okay, British for the British.
Anyway,
No,
so
I did a Christmas quiz
we don't
today, a
do
music
politics on
quiz.
this podcast.
No, I did a music quiz at the Christmas party and put on ELO. Telephone line, absolute classic. Blank, 40 blank faces.
Telephone line.
We'll do it in the same key next time. But blank faces.
Sometime
What are you living in?
I'm living in twilight.
Du-du-du-du-du-du.
CBD showed an increase in depressed rats' movements. You're going to ask me, how the hell did they know the rats were depressed?
Yeah.
Because they stuck them in beakers of water in forced swimming, so in situations of chronic stress, basically.
So
Fighting not to drown for like hours.
So a
And
little
then
bit
they
like
would-
humans do when they get stressed. That can lead to
chronically
depression.
stressed can lead to,
Man.
and then they become inactive and off their food and all the behavioural indices that correlate with depression, but also neurochemically depleted in serotonin, or the serotonin turnover reduced and so on. So, and we've long had this depression model in animals. So they did work there, which showed that CBD might even be helpful in depression, although we've not got any human evidence for that. And then, other things like CBD blocked anxiety-induced REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep.
Which is normally a good thing, but not if there's too much.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And CBD seemed to affect serotonin receptor function, as I said, and expression in rat brains.
Oh, you know what the word receptor?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the thing that receives the chemical message on the membrane of the brain cell, basically.
And then it does something as a result of that.
And then it increases its activity and
Yeah.
then sends a signal onto the next brain cell.
Brilliant. That was a very good explanation because you've mentioned it loads and I've never had the nerve to ask.
That's how, brain cells communicate with one another. The neurotransmitters, the chemicals are released from what they call the presynaptic membrane of one cell, which then binds the receptor on the postsynaptic membrane of the next cell. And so the signal goes on, gets transmitted on.
What is incredible is that I'm learning a lot about neural networks now in computing.
Right.
And what you've just described is exactly how a computing neural network
Right,
works.
because you've got nodes that switch on and off,
Correct.
basically.
They don't actually switch on and off, funnily enough.
But it's more qualitative. Oh, right. So is it qualitative?
Yeah.
Quantitative
Well,
difference.
they're set at an amount, normally between 0 and 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are weightings and functions that propagate that signal across the neural network till it gets to the...
This is AI we're talking about now, isn't it?
It's a form of AI. It's a neural network, which is a form of AI.
Love it.
Propagates across the network until you get a set of neurons at the end from which you can interpret the result. It's amazing.
Right.
But so close to what you just described.
Well, I
as the
think
firing of neurons.
is this machine learning that
So,
uses this?
Again, that is a type of machine
AI,
learning.
yeah.
So really,
it's a type of machine learning.
strictly, a neural network is a type of machine learning, which is a type of AI.
Got it. Excellent. Yeah, because I know that machine learning and Bayesian probability is being used now to understand neural networks. So it's all feeding into each other.
Correct. So AI is not something new. It's something
No.
we've always been able to do with complicated maths or even simple maths, but lots of it. And now we've got the computing power available really easily and the data to exploit
Right.
it. It's a fabulous time for computing, my
and
friends.
then if you go on to quantum computers, then you've got another even more, a huge layer of capability there.
in terms of computing power
and
more than
therefore
exponential.
more than-
Unbelievable.
Amazing. Right. So potentially going to outclass the human brain. But anyway, let's not go there.
So the only reason I think it
Although it
isn't-
doesn't have emotions.
no, because you can have as much data and much processing power as you like. If the action of the machine is not the same as the action of the brain, it's never gonna be better at it. It's always been better at it at some things. So
Yeah.
computers have been better at adding up for decades.
Yeah.
Does that frighten us? Not really.
No, it's very useful to us.
It's just
Without
complicated
threatening us.
processing. Yeah. The only trouble with AI is, and this in the medical field, is when it comes to predicting diagnosis, which machines are better than doctors in some situations, is that if AI goes wrong, it totally fucks up. It just doesn't go wrong a bit. It just gets an
Right.
answer which is completely
Whereas human
incomprehensible.
beings don't go completely wrong. It might get it a little bit inaccurate.
Exactly, and they get there eventually.
We'll get there eventually, yeah. Fine. Okay.
I
So-
love AI.
This is turning into a very nerdy podcast. It's fine, whatever. Nerd is the new cool, right? Geeks are cool. They're going to inherit the earth. Well, they have done, actually. They've in Silicon Valley, haven't they, already? So you're gonna ask me another question now to get us out of this hole, this cul-de-sac.
Is it a hole, or is it just a really interesting place to go? Yeah, what I'm interested in is problematic. The problems with this, and the first one seems to me, particularly in the unlicensed world, whether there is an issue with people just self-medicating. I mean, can you overdose?
Right.
How do you know how much to give yourself?
Well, let's see what evidence is there out there about dosing and effectiveness of CBD. We had one study looking at a certain dose of CBD that improved social anxiety in social situations. There was a crossover study comparing CBD with nitrazepam for sleep, and a dose of 160 milligrams a day or at night increased the duration of sleep compared to nitrazepam, apparently. There was another study showed that the similar dose reduced plasma cortisol levels. So cortisol is the stress hormone that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So it suggests that it increases your resilience to stress. Then there was a series of over 100 people, but actually that's not that big in terms of the reliability and robustness of a finding. You'd want more than just 100 people. But anyway, they were attending a clinic for anxiety and sleep disorders. CBD, when given alongside treatment as usual, so other treatments they were receiving, led to an improvement in anxiety scores in 80% and sleep in 70%.
Can I just stop you there?
That was about 600 milligrams. And then...
just stop you there, just quickly. When you say in combination with other drugs, that always confuses me. Is that because...
As an add-on.
Is it an add-on, though? Or is it the two drugs combining nicely, or do we just not know?
We don't know. There's no way of knowing just from that one study. And, of course, it's likely that they will have got ethical approval to add it on rather than stop existing treatments and then start that because there is insufficient
They have
evidence
no
at this
choice
stage.
but to do that add-on.
Probably. And then there's growing evidence CBD has potential as an antipsychotic, which I think is really interesting, incredible. And I remember this study being done in 2005. There was a case report in 1995, ages ago, where 1,500 milligrams of CBD was used as a standalone therapy in a single individual with schizophrenia who responded. And then in 2006, the same research group followed up with a case series in which 1 out of 3 patients with treatment-refractory schizophrenia improved with flexible dosing of CBD. But, these were treatment-refractory, so that was interesting.
What does that mean?
That weren't responding. They were still having symptoms despite being treated with a conventional antipsychotic medication, which, as you know, carries with it a lot of side effects. And CBD, in comparison, has virtually none. So then there was in 2012, it's a one published randomized controlled trial of 39 adults with schizophrenia who were randomized to 800 milligrams of CBD or a conventional antipsychotic drug called amisulpride. And over 4 weeks of randomized treatment, the CBD resulted in as much improvement in overall symptoms and positive symptoms as amisulpride.
And that's a well-established drug, the amisulpride.
Yeah, and that's a
Wow.
well-established drug. So
That is interesting.
So it's not enough evidence on its own, though. 2 other trials began, I believe, in 2017, 2018. The Institute of Psychiatry, part of King's College London, with Philip McGuire. He's the professor of psychiatry there in cognitive neuroscience. And he's been long interested in its use. So I think we're still waiting for that work to be finished and published. But so far, so good, he says. So he was of the opinion that CBD works in the opposite way to THC. THC makes you psychotic. CBD has the opposite effect. And we know, of course, don't we, that teenagers who regularly use cannabis treble their risk of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Whereas his studies seem to show that CBD is having an antipsychotic effect in patients with schizophrenia. So it's kind of exciting. It's showing a lot of potential.
Because it's a classic thing when people who smoke a lot of weed, the classic is they either get mellow and silly or they can get paranoid. So presumably that's the internal battle of THC versus CBD in their little brains.
Well, I think a lot of individuals use cannabis as a way of getting around anxiety or insomnia, and of course, initially it seemed to have this calming effect, but then the later effects are the paranoia and and actually paradoxically an increase in anxiety.
So do you think there might be a difference in the time period over which THC acts on the brain as opposed to CBD? That would suggest that, I guess.
Not necessarily. It could just be that the sedative effects of THC wear off to leave the paranoid, the other symptoms. But it also is going to be a dose. There's going to be a dose response issue going on there. But if you were going to give one public health message to people who like to use cannabis recreationally, you'd say, don't go for the skunk weed, which is the hydroponic stuff, which is deliberately it's a plant strain and a technique that's deliberately used to increase THC concentration in relation to the CBD. Go for one where, for example, where they've legalized cannabis in Switzerland, where they'll sell you stuff that has equal amounts of THC and CBD, so that there is an effect of CBD that helps protect the brain from the effects of the THC. You're sort of cancelling out the more harmful effects. That's the theory anyway. And sort of Philip McGuire would back that up, saying go for something with a lower percentage of THC.
I think most people smoke to relax and have a sort of mellow experience, don't they? Which sounds a lot more CBD-y than it does to THC.
CBD doesn't. Yeah, I suppose so. Although, no, that's true. It may be that THC has some sedative. It does probably have some sedative effect, but that is stronger. But unfortunately, it has these other more harmful effects too.
So if I read, you as possibly the leading psychiatrist and author in the UK, I'm reading directly from the flyleaf of your book, obviously.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
You sound fairly optimistic for the future of CBD.
Cautiously optimistic, because sometimes you get these. I'm not telling you to rush out and get CBD because there are risks involved, which we'll come to, but. I would say it's showing promise, but then a lot of drugs in the early stages show promise, and then when you put them up against placebo, you find they aren't particularly more effective than the placebo. So that's what needs to happen. We need to have much more rigorous investigation of CBD effects for these disorders, from anxiety through to depression through to psychosis.
It would seem that you're quite excited by the breadth of possibility as well as the likelihood of it honing in on one particular condition. Is that fair, or is it?
I think it's fair. I mean, I think that one of the positive things is you've got the compound already. You don't need to invent the molecule. It's there. What you do need to do is show its effectiveness, and that will cost millions of pounds to do, frustratingly.
So pharmaceuticals do two things, really. They invent stuff, but they also place bets on running a series of experiments to prove the efficacy against a particular condition of a particular drug.
They very much place bets, because only a small fraction of the number of molecules that they develop actually turn out to be of therapeutic benefit.
So could it be that one pharmaceutical company could invest in one outcome of CBD? But why hasn't that happened if it's so encouraging?
I think it will happen.
Oh, right, okay.
It's happened for other drugs that are already around, which are slightly controversial, like ketamine, which is now made in a nasal preparation by Johnson & Johnson's been patented as such as a treatment for depression, right? So it's happening already in the US, and it's likely to be licensed here because the early trials are encouraging.
And when you say licensed, what that actually means is gives the doctor the ability to prescribe it, and exclusivity to a pharmaceutical company potentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because they have to get a return for their investment, and they will do that by patenting its use for that particular indication. And they're able to do that because they've shown proof of concept. They've been able to spend the money on the trials to show it, and not only show its efficacy but show its safety. Of course, and that's the other important aspect of a trial, is to show, because that's the other thing where, of course, pharmaceutical companies see their investment fly away is when they see that something actually has such adverse effects, which they didn't predict.
Yeah, and how could you? Because the system's too
and
complex.
sometimes those adverse effects only show themselves once it's gone to market and general population is using it, and then someone has an unfortunate adverse reaction. They have to pull it from the market.
Have you heard about
all that investment gone?
Have you heard about the concept of digital twin in pharmaceutical?
Digital twin.
Yeah. So basically, what that is instead of mixing compounds in test tubes, you mimic the action of compounds in a digital space. In other words, within a computer, and the computer knows so much about the action of each individual molecule that it can predict potentially brilliantly what the outcome will be.
Right.
And that's called digital twinning, and it's got all sorts of applications. But in pharmaceuticals, you can imagine you can do a digital twin and run 1,000 experiments in a second.
Right. Which helps you develop the molecule in the first place, right?
It helps you prove what the likely outcomes will be.
It's chemistry, but it's not clinical, because it's not clinical evidence, because you haven't put that inside a human being yet.
No, but you obviously have to do that, but it obviously shortcuts the first bit, which is testing loads of million different things.
Well, I think it's interesting. We've got proof of concept in animal studies already. So it's now time for people to do the trials in humans and show an improvement against placebo. But we've got, of course, countless claims out there already from user groups in the internet, into the internet and so on, that CBD is a panacea for all sorts of problems.
But in terms of licensing, you can only sort of do one clinical outcome at a time, if you like. So what about the slight elephant in the room, not a massive elephant in the room, maybe a sort of baby elephant in the room, or I don't know what a small animal is in an elephant. Oh, every animal. Anyway, so it's got an association with being illegal in recreational drugs, as has ketamine, of course. Is that going to prevent it getting into the mainstream? Because people are going to think, well, I'm not going to take a narcotic drug, regardless of the fact that they'd happily take diamorphine.
Interesting question. I mean, I suppose the figures speak for themselves. I mean, 1.2 million people are already taking CBD without all the scientific evidence to back it up, and 14% of US adults. So, I mean, my impression is that people don't regard CBD as having the same stigma as cannabis.
Yeah.
But of course, once something's prescribed anyway, its stigma tends to disappear. So once we get to that level of evidence, then maybe things will change dramatically.
Well, it might be.
And we've got a lot of lobbying already for legalizing cannabis in this country for medicinal use, cannabis and its derivatives. Because in the states, majority of states have now legalized it for medical use, haven't they? 30 of the 50 states, and Washington DC. Just
make the distinction between legalized for medical use versus legalized for recreational
use. Yeah, it's only 9 states and Washington DC legalized cannabis for recreational use. Canada has also done that,
and that's actually cannabis, not CBD.
Yes, but I think then there's an implication that CBD is okay too.
Of course,
So that has also been part of the huge rise in CBD use.
Yeah, I think it might. And also, of course, when it goes mainstream, if it's backed by a pharmaceutical company, it'll be marketed without with the connotation of cannabis stripped out.
You'd brand it. Yeah, absolutely.
Cannabanxiety go.
Exactly. Great. You are obviously a branding expert, Oliver.
Pharmaceutical branding expert.
Yeah. Or enormously impressive.
Thank you. That's very good of you.
Yeah.
So what are the downsides? So we cover those? Yeah, of chronic use of doobie, ganja.
I mean, I have to say, apparently CBD does increase the level in your blood of the blood thinner coumadin, with the theoretical risk of increased proneness to bruising or bleeding. But then you got that with aspirin, and it's all going to come down to dosing.
Right.
And I don't know of any case ever been reported of this happening with someone using CBD. So I think it's probably a theoretical risk rather than a real risk. You've also got reports of it causing problems in the liver of rats if you give them high doses. But human beings are very different to rats, and I don't know of any evidence that it causes liver problems in humans from taking it yet. And I guess we've got a big experiment out there already of people using. The Other mild symptoms are thought to be nausea, sedation, fatigue, and irritability. But again, without placebo-controlled studies, you don't know if these are real or imagined, because placebos, of course, carry side effects.
That sounds absolutely bizarre, but I can
Yeah.
imagine how it happens. I
Yeah.
mean, if you can feel better taking a placebo, you can certainly have other effects of taking a placebo, I would have thought.
I suppose you'd want to know if CBD carries any addictive potential, but there's been no evidence of that so far, and quite a lot of people have been taking it. You may find that you have a psychological dependence on it. May or may not be a bad thing. It depends on its long-term safety, I suppose. There's a difference between taking something every once in a while and taking it every day for years. Difficult to say what the long-term impact is, and often you don't know until something has been released on the general public, I guess. The main thing is dose finding. We need dose finding studies. I quoted those patchy studies that we've done so far in wildly ranging different doses. The trouble with going and buying an unregulated substance from an unregulated source, like a health food store, is you don't know really what kind of dose you're taking. From one preparation to another, it might vary, and so on and so forth. And there's final thing to say is it has a similar effect to grapefruit juice, and a lot of people are increasingly aware of this. If you grapefruit juice
Are you
and
making this
CBD induce a certain enzyme in the liver which can affect the level of other medications that you're taking. So you should actually go and see your doctor if you're thinking about taking CBD.
And Weetabix as well, apparently.
No,
No, not Weetabix.
not Weetabix.
Broccoli. You seem to be making up foods.
No, I'm not. It's grapefruit juice in
Grapefruit
particular.
juice.
Yeah.
Right.
CBD has a grapefruit juice effect. A lot of people out there will know exactly what I'm talking about, but
Not Bisto then. or
Not
anything?
Bisto.
No, Bisto's fine. How weird. Okay.
but in fact, if it's pretty safe and does some good, it potentially is a bit of a wonder drug. It has it's interesting. But I don't think people should be cavalier with it. I think they should use it cautiously, and with the sort of say so of your doctor if you're on other meds.
So this is what I've learned today.
Oh, you can do one of your special summaries.
I'm going to try and do one of my special summaries
Lovely.
today. Oh, bless you. But and then you can augment it at the
I
end,
love
as
those.
usual. So this is what I've learned. So I've learned that cannabis has many chemicals within it, about 80. And the two most proliferating, there's most of them, are these good old THC, which is a psychoactive substance, and CBD, which is not psychoactive.
Yeah, they're the main constituents of cannabis.
The main constituents of cannabis. Once isolated, CBD is thought to have certain advantageous properties medicinally.
It's also legal.
And it's also legal for treatment of things like...
Legally available, yeah.
Yeah, there's not much of a summary, more of a sort of...
Not legally prescribed. More of a conversation.
Yeah.
Carry on. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I think
Please
I
carry
think
on.
this is the most important bits that we're doing between us. So CBD is non-psychoactive, second most abundant, and can be taken in oil form, and is thought to have certain advantages medicinally, which need to be proven for it to be put on the formula of the UK and therefore be prescribed by doctors with confidence. However, the first bets that might be placed seem to be possibly in the area of
Anxiety.
Anxiety, but the thing that poor lad deputy called or
Epilepsy.
particularly in children, they seem to be the most fruitful.
Well, that's
areas.
the thing that's probably licensing is imminent for. Yeah.
And so I think your view is it's an encouraging drug. It's a complex drug. It mimics drugs that are already produced in the brain to help us cope with anxiety, and that cautiously you think there might be a future for this drug, but we should wait until it has been licensed, which is a condition for it to be prescribed by doctors and sold in a controlled fashion. And that's likely to happen fairly soon, I guess.
Beautiful. Beautiful summary as ever, Oliver.
You're very kind.
Perfect.
I've learned a lot about canned cannabidiol.
You need to have a cautiously optimistic view of it, but not see it as this wonder drug panacea, because we haven't got enough evidence that it is yet.
And there never will be a wonder drug panacea. It just is a dream.
No, and the idea that you can just take a tablet to take away your anxiety, I think, is silly anyway, because mostly you're going to have to take a holistic approach to that.
Well, I get quite anxious. I mean, would it be worth someone like me? I sometimes think, oh golly, the day is going to be hard to face and everything's going to go wrong. Do you think I should be experimenting with this stuff, or should I be a bit more cautious?
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen, just as we're closing off an episode. Look, I can't tell you what to do. All I would say is, if you're going to try it, be cautious. And I think we should end there. Let's get some feedback from you. Please get in touch. Oliver?
Yeah, so you can get in touch with us a variety of ways. In fact, almost all the new digital ways. So we are on Facebook. Just type in Y, W-H-Y, and then TLF. So YTLF, and you'll get us on Facebook or Instagram. Twitter, our handle is YTLF, and our email address is hi@ytlf.com. And we have a website. We've been ever so busy.
Yeah, and also, wherever you get your podcasts, please do give us a rating. That would be very, very useful.
Any rating, by the way, good or very good.
Yeah, that's it. I'd say very good or excellent. Bye for now.